Hello, I'm Matt Ford. I'm a research analyst at the Centre for Crime and Justice Studies, and I'm here to talk to you today about what happens to prisons, prison sites, once the prisons close. So this is part of our project After Prison, which you may or may not be aware of. It's fundamentally guided by the principle that there's always a better use for a piece of land than as a place for a prison. And the project is about exploring how land currently occupied by prisons might be redeveloped for the benefit of the communities surrounding those prisons. So we're raising awareness and supporting action about how prison sites can be used differently, and that's going to be led by the communities who live around prisons. At this point in the project, we're just interested in starting that conversation about what better uses prison land can be put to. And it's quite difficult to think about that. I mean, prisons seem pretty immovable. Loads of them are well old. Wakefield Prison has been there since, I think, the 16th century or the 17th century. So to try to, and obviously by their very nature, they seem movable. They're very big, they're very imposing, and they're very robust. So to try to contextualise this, I've come up with some examples of prisons which have closed and then something different has happened to the site afterwards. I've got an old example and I've got a new example. So the first old one is Millbank Prison in central London. It's close to our offices in Vauxhall. You may not be aware of it, but that closed in 1890. It performed various functions in it while it was in operation. So it was the National Penitentiary, holding both men and women. It was a holding point for prisoners facing deportation to the colonies. It was a local prison, and finally a military prison. And now that site is where Tate Britain Art Gallery is, so a very beautiful building and a very culturally important gallery resource. The second example is Holloway Prison in Islington. So that was built in the mid-19th century. And for most of its life, it was a women's prison. And by the time it closed in 2016, it was the largest women's prison in Europe. It held about 500 prisoners at any one time. And in 2019, after a successful community campaign that the centre was heavily involved in, the site was sold to Peabody Housing Association. And their current proposals include 600 affordable homes, which includes 400 at social rent. So that's a very high proportion for this type of development. Another 400 homes will be at market value. It also includes 1.5 acre public park and the women's resource in the bottom floor of one of the buildings. In kind of honour, as legacy of the fact that the site used to be a women's prison. We also have another little example from our friends over at Prison History UK. Check out their Twitter. And they highlighted an example of an old lockup, which was now used as part of the village's Christmas celebrations. So they put a nativity scene in there and they sing carols around it, so that's obviously very cute. My point is, these are all much more socially useful, socially beneficial uses for these sites than as places for prisons. So my questions to you are, do you know of a former prison site near you, and what happened to it after the prison closed? That can be an example of a very old prison that closed. It doesn't have to be a recent example. Where I'm from in York, there was a prison there that was demolished in 1935. It's an interesting example about what it is now. The second question, that I'd like to ask you is, if the prison site closest to you wasn't there, what kinds of things could the land be used for? If you'd like to know where your local prison is, you can use a map that's on our website. So www.crimeandjustice.org.uk. You can find a map of prisons that I developed on there, and you can see how much land the prison occupies, and you can have a think about what you'd rather see on there. So Could be what your local community needs: affordable housing, you know, a nice big park, some allotments. You know, it can be anything. And if you have any thoughts or ideas, please just drop them under the tweet of this video, or get in touch at info@crimeandjustice.org.uk. Thank you very much, and I'll see you later. Bye.